My name is Kim Mayer, and I'm Associate Director of the California Institute for Mental Health, or CIMH. And it's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce our distinguished speakers again, and to also help moderate the session this afternoon. So we have Judge Manley, and the Honorable Judge Manley is a Superior Court judge in Santa Clara County, and he served there for over 30 years. He presently serves as a supervising judge of all felony and misdemeanor and mental health cases in the criminal division of the court. He developed and personally presides over a number of treatment court programs, and the calendar, which includes over 2,300 offenders who participate in treatment and rehab services while on probation, supervision, or parole who are mentally ill, mentally challenged, and substance abusers. He established one of the first mental health courts in the nation in 1998. Do you mind if I don't read if I skip this down? Okay, and then I'm also going to introduce our Judge Loftus also. Judge Loftus is the chair of the Mental Health Issues Implementation Task Force, and he was a member of the Task Force on Criminal Justice Collaboration on Mental Health Issues from 2009 to 2011. He is the past presiding judge of the Superior Court of Santa Clara County. Judge Loftus was appointed in 1998 and has served in both the civil and criminal courts. He was supervising judge of the family court and supervising and presiding judge of the juvenile court. While in juvenile court, he presided over the first juvenile mental health court and was actively promoted the establishment of such courts throughout the nation. He has served on numerous judicial council advisory committees, including vice chair of the presiding judges advisory committee, the working group on criminal justice realignment, Judicial Branch Leadership Budget Group, AB 1208 Ad Hoc Legislative Committee, Judicial Recruitment and Retention Working Group, and the CJER faculty. He received his BA and MA from the University of Detroit as JD from the University of Michigan. Please welcome back these two gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you for your attendance and interest. I'm going to start the session with a little different approach than we've used in most of our other sessions, and that is with a film. And before I show the film, it's about 6.5, 7 minutes. It is actually a compilation of a number. One is done by professionally by one of the news stations, and the other part, or the major part of the film, was all produced and directed by a mentally ill offender who had a background in filmmaking before becoming very mentally ill and going to the state hospital, and then being found competent and being restored, and then getting out of the criminal justice system. And so it does not, so you will see two different viewpoints of life, and one very professionally done and one done by a client. But I think, to me, the importance of the film is, first of all, most people say, what is a mental health court? Well, this is a real one, and you see what happens in it a little bit. And more importantly, when I talk about the importance of listening to people, you actually hear people that you probably have all worked with or know about, similar people, and it just makes, to me, the work that we do far more human. So let's just start with that and go from there, and hopefully everything will work here. We never know. Okay, Judge. That's the courthouse.
Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of fears without crying. Now I want to understand. I have done all that I could to see the evil and the good without hiding. You must help me if you can.
Been homeless before now?
I've been bouncing around since about 96, in and out of jail. Is that okay to say?
Absolutely okay to say.
And I've been in trouble and going to jail since about 96 steady, and the court sent me here.
They did?
Yeah.
Who sent you here?
Judge Manley.
Judge Manley.
So I've been in the system. I just want to run this, but I was put in Agnew State Hospital when I was 9 years old.
Yes, my mother. It started with my mother giving me $20 to let my dad play with me.
Okay.
And then it just progressed from there, where we'd ride around drinking wine and getting drunk, and I'd get to drive the car, and we'd play in the back seat.
Okay, when I was about, I don't know how old, 6 or 7, I think about 6 years old. Me and my kid brother went to the Jose Theater.
I remember one time she got so pissed off, she grabbed a board with nails in it and spanked me. I wouldn't drink water for a week because I thought it'd come out the holes. I thought it'd leak out like the cartoon, you know, the dude that got shot, he'd drink water and his water come out. Well, I had holes in me, so I figured that if I drank water, it'd come out the holes. Yeah, I wouldn't drink for a whole week.
So, drinking all that soda, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I went to the bathroom, and then that's when it happened, you know what I mean? I got, and I wanted to go because the guy followed us all around, so I left.
And so they had me in the front of the truck with them, and something happened. I don't remember what happened, but something happened, and I just started kicking the dash and just pulling my hair out by the handfuls. And my dad says, "We got to get her some help."
But anyway, I ended out there because I got involved. I used heroin, and I was put there.
How old were you when you
Heroin, 9 years old.
How did you get heroin at 9
Well,
years old?
I mean, I got it from people. You know what I mean? I didn't do it. I mean, I just got the cottons. You know what I mean?
The what?
The cotton, when they
Did you know what it
a wet
was
cotton,
when you started?
but it made me feel good. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it because it fixed me. You know what I mean?
What was wrong with you?
The world was crazy, and I needed to get out of it. You know, and
I used to think it was just only me, because I used to think when I was in school I didn't get an education because I was just too mean. I was just too mean. I didn't want to listen to any authority whatsoever because I couldn't trust my parents because they were supposed to be the authority figure in my life. And look at what happened. I wasn't like anybody in school. I was different. I couldn't talk to anybody in school because my life was different than theirs. So I just didn't fit in anywhere. So I just became a ditcher of school, missing school, and then I started smoking pot. I was sniffing lighter fluid at the age of 8.
Why?
Because I didn't want to feel nothing.
Program that takes inmates as sick or sicker than these and puts them back on medication and back on the street. It's called mental health court.
There are no free passes out of jail.
Tough-talking, tough-looking Judge Stephen Manley, with a patch over an old eye injury, oversees 800 defendants in his special San Jose court. Most are addicted and mentally ill.
Sure, you're disabled, but that doesn't mean you can't live a full life.
They're mostly nonviolent felony and misdemeanor offenders who work their way from county jail to closely supervised probation.
We are protecting the public far more than simply placing a defendant on probation and ignoring them and waiting for the next crime to happen.
That strict probation includes group home living, mandatory drug tests, AA or Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and frequent progress reports to the judge. In this court, the largest of 130 nationwide, defendants are given tough love and compassion.
Still talk fast.
Still talk fast.
But I try people tell me, when people tell me and correct me on it, I try to say, okay, well, slow down.
They are also given a choice: stay clean, stay on the right medication, and they can stay out of jail.
Do you think you can maintain until then? Okay, because the only real alternative I have is to have you go to jail.
Case in point, this was Rick Dargan, 18 months ago, schizophrenic, sweating off a heroin binge, charged with possession, and begging for help. And Rick Dargan now, at age 47, back in high school, off illegal drugs and on medication to stabilize his mood swings.
I owe everything I've got right now to those people in that mental health court.
The man who once lived under a bridge is now clean and sober.
I was a violent person. I'm nonviolent now.
The program saves money, too. Graduates have spared the state and county more than $23 million in jail and prison costs. And it can save lives. Just ask Rick Dargan.
I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
Lucky, too, that unlike the estimated tens of thousands of mentally ill behind bars across America, he had his day in a very special court.
The answer is to believe in yourself and try.
Jerry Bowen, CBS News, San Jose.
His record is clear, and the arrests are deemed never to have occurred, other than it's provided in Section 1203.4.
So congratulations, Donnie. We invite you to all right. We have the stamp on without the stamp you can't have the court papers right. Donnie, congratulations.
Golly, this is one hug that I thought I'd never get. My girlfriend says, who is this guy, Judge Manley, that you always want to hug?
Not all that many people want to hug me, but that's good.
That I should know. Things I shouldn't know. Unless they're truths that I should know.
I don't know. I've just learned a lot. You know, I've been coming to this courtroom for like a long time now, a very long time. And I remember coming in this courtroom very angry, and now I'm just yes, now I'm very grateful.
Well, that's a good thing that you're grateful that your life's getting better.
Yes, my life is getting a lot better. I don't need to depend on anybody anymore. You know, I'm down here by myself, and I'm in my kids' life. You know, in both of my kids' life. And I'm okay. I'm okay with myself, you know.
That's good enough for me, boy. It's all we can ever ask for.
Okay. See if we can get out of this. And then we will. Yeah, just get into our. Okay. All right, so that is an example of what the court looks like and the clients that are sent there. The notation about the 25 years. He is he's still in the community, he hasn't reoffended, but he is a 3-striker. So if he committed another felony, that would be his 4th strike. And that is the reason that part of the film was shot back, I believe, in about 2008. At that time, when he was sent to me, it was 25 years to life in prison, and the judge who sent him to me made a decision to allow him to participate in treatment and granted him probation, which a judge could do instead of sending him to prison. So it's an example of the incredible, when you talk about cost savings, people like that don't need to be in prison. He had changed his life. He just decompensated and committed a relatively 2 felonies, 1 drug and 1 petty theft with a prior, which means he stole something with a prior criminal record for being convicted of that offense. And but under the law, if the judge had not granted that motion, he would have gone to prison for a minimum of 25 years. All right, so what we're going to talk about this afternoon are about the lessons that we've learned. They're not simply from my mental health court. This is a compilation based on the results and those aspects of mental health that have been found effective across the country. As I said, there were at that time about 120 mental health courts, and now there's a substantially larger number. We have close to 30 in California, and new ones being formed, as you heard from Judge Morse today. So the issue, we're going to talk a little bit about traditional sentencing, because I think, and supervision, because I think the more you can understand this, the better you can see. When Judge Loftus talked about the recommendations of our task force, the changes that we have to make, how major these changes are, even though you've already heard about most of them, because it's really a different way of doing business in terms of what the courts do. We're going to talk about the mental health model, the critical elements, why mental health treatment isn't enough. And that's already been discussed, but it is not clear, it's not at all clear to me that judges have the slightest idea that this is true, and I am not seeing it out in practice. I'm seeing a recognition of it, but nothing's happening. Then how do you get good outcomes, and then strategies to do a better job at supervision and treatment and the future, because I think this all ties into the future. And then we're going to talk about juveniles, okay? Because there is a big difference between, in a mental health court setting, of working with adults and juveniles, an incredibly large difference. And those of you who work with both or one or the other, I hope already understand that. So lesson one is what we've already talked about, and you've seen this data. This is what I would like you to see, because I think this is, to me, the most troublesome thing. Most data you see tells you, okay, we got a large, and I can tell you, having been a judge many years, working with the mentally ill for many, many years, I know the numbers are increasing. It is not the same people being rearrested. But this is a compilation of 10 studies that evaluated what is going on in our prisons and jails, and what the line to look at is the red one, because this is projecting where we're going to be in 10 years from now. You see, this cutoff is in about the year 2000. We're at 20%. Some studies show it's 30, some show it's 18, some show it's 14. But the point is, if you go back to the 1980s, you are seeing this dramatic increase over a relatively short period of time. And if you project that out, if we don't do something about it, our system is going to be overrun by people who are mentally ill. We also know, this is important to me, because when Mac Jenkins talks about changing the way probation and parole works with individuals, there are study after study after study that show the incredible difference in punishment for those on probation and parole who are mentally ill in comparison to the very same person who is not mentally ill and has the same level of supervision, the same committing offense to prison or probation. It's just, a lesson that we should have learned 10 years ago and didn't. Now, what is our traditional reaction in courts? What do judges do, and what have we been doing for years? I look at it this way, because I watch sentencing all the time. I mean, my program, in that we were at 800, now we're at 2,300. Everyone comes to me from another judge. We're a very large court. We have a large number of judges, many different philosophies, many different views, great deal of independence, as there should be. But when I look at our sentencing, people fall into these categories. The rapid cyclers, these are the people that come in and out of jail, in and out, again and again and again. They get credit for time served. They never go to a hearing. They never see anybody. They just moving on, and we're not doing anything at all. Then there is the person who comes in where there's something wrong. The judge knows that. The DA, the public defender, it may be discussed, it may not. But this person has committed an offense, and they're not sure what exactly to do, because there is no mental health court out there. There are no services. There's no discharge planning. You see, judges have to work with what they have. And when you leave a judge with nothing, then the judges, it's always going to go back to public safety's number one, retribution, and those things that we've used in the past forever. And when there's something wrong, what happens often is the defendant stays in custody. And he stays in custody until everybody, the DA, the public defender, and the judge, public defender says it's been too long. The DA says, well, it's about right. And probation says, well, it's probably all right. And the judge feels all right, and then they let him out. All right? And so that's what happens with these people. They just simply stay in jail, and that's why this disproportionate sentencing for the mentally ill, because we're not basing it on anything other than there's something wrong here, and this is, we better worry about it. Then you have the people that are dangerous, probably dangerous, and we got some reasons to know that, their prior record and so forth. The present offense is a serious one. Well, the judge doesn't have any problem with that because they get punished. I mean, that is the response. We don't think generally past that they're going to get out of prison. Everybody gets out of prison unless you're a three-striker. You're going to get out. And then we look at competency. We have an elaborate system for competency. And what happens to those people? They get warehoused. I mentioned this morning about misdemeanors. Yesterday, one of the supervisor, by the way, I'm not the supervisor of all. That should have said Drugs and mental health. The supervisor of criminal is another judge, very fine judge. He sent me a case yesterday of someone who committed a relatively minor misdemeanor. It did involve some violence, but the maximum punishment is a year. He has been in custody, including, he can't go to a hospital, right? 3 years. 3 years. The maximum term of probation for a misdemeanor is 3 years. How did this happen? Easily. Huge court, huge volume of people. Violence, he has a record. Nobody knows. He's one of those, we don't know what to do. But what's wrong with the system is he got warehoused, and then he said to me, and the time's run. I should not have jurisdiction. We should have gotten rid of him. This is not right. This is totally wrong. So I release him to what? He's homeless. You see, no one ever, you heard the most team, nobody ever intervened with him. Nobody ever did a discharge plan. Nobody ever all they did is give him medications in jail for 3 years. I mean, whatever good that's going to do, he's going to stop taking them. He's got nowhere to go, and they let him out at midnight, unless I order him released today, which I did. These are the challenges, okay? So, how do we get this way? Well, I think there are 3 things. We have to be honest as judges. In general, we're no different than the public. Out of control behavior, violence, look at the big events, you're always going to see that issue of mental illness, mental instability come up. I actually feel and believe, looking at polling and so forth, that the public is way ahead of us. They're much more into treatment and rehabilitation. They realize that we're not going to stop this by simply leaving people out in the community untreated. But this out of control of behavior leads us to believe and have a perception that they're violent. The second thing that goes on is we use incarceration to achieve social control. I don't want them in downtown Santa Cruz, because this is a vacation town. It's where people come to go to the beach and the boardwalk. And I don't want these crazy people up and down the street. Get them out of here. Judges, do something. How many times I've had in the past, city council say, well, we don't want them in this particular, why don't you do something about it? Now no longer is that said to me. We are learning. Government's learning that you just don't, judges can't stop people from doing things. We're very limited in what we can do. We can incarcerate, yes, but everybody gets out. But that's one of the things we have been doing for years is incarcerating for social control. And then the other thing that I think for those of you in drugs and alcohol, Prop 36 and all of this, judges have learned a lot about substance abuse, believe it or not. And as a result, we often ignore the fact that the person's mentally ill. Mentally ill people all use drugs, at least all of mine do, and all of the others across the country. And therefore, when they come in on an 11-550 under the influence or possession or whatever, we don't think about the mental illness. And as you know, when you're talking to somebody who's mentally ill and taking medications or even not taking medications, they may talk in a way that leads a police officer to believe they're under the influence. They don't, and so it's much easier to think of people as drug addicts because we know more about them than we do about the mentally ill, and we can, so we can get that. Therefore, we don't even look at them. Finally, they have a very high level of probation and parole supervision traditionally, because they're considered to be more dangerous. Same kind of thinking the judges have. And that's why, Mac Jenkins is retraining. Parole is going to have to retrain parole agents to look at people differently. So that's what the traditional approach is. There's another issue that I think is very important, and that's stigma. And that is because, we may say, all right, judges are above this. We are not, this does not trouble us. We can look past it. But look, the real truth is there is a moral view about drug addicts, the mentally ill, and challenged offenders, as well as parolees. There is a moral view that these people are bad, and it's all wrong. But if we don't recognize it up front, as a judge, we can fall right into it. These are all losers and failures. And how many times do I walk out every day and see this mass of people in custody in orange and green and different color, we color code in our jail, And I can't look at them that way. I have to look at them as individuals and remind myself again and again and again that they're not just parolees in jail. And stigma results in the fact also that they are not accepted well in the community. Why don't they go to treatment? Why do they stay in the downtown area? Because they're hanging around people that are like them, and because they feel more accepted by the people who are like them than they're ever going to be accepted. As you heard the wonderful young man from Santa Cruz, you know, how he's had to change his approach, and he walks, you know, he does this 3 times before he makes, and then he's got to talk to him differently. Well, that's because they put up those barriers the minute you come near them, and they don't do well. And these are just, you know, this is, you know, to me, this is my favorite. This is methamphetamine. Everything is always negative. This other one is a great problem because, you know, there's this perception that mentally ill people can't get better. You know, people with heart conditions and cancer, even cancer, you can get better, but mentally ill have a fatal flaw. This goes back to my view that a lot of this is driven by this moral concept, that these people are inherently screwed up in their genes and in their brains, and they're flawed, and therefore, why even try to treat them? Okay, lesson 2. We have to change our response and change as best we can our criminal justice system. The first thing that judges have to do is something that we do not do now. We do not accept responsibility for outcomes. I consider myself as responsible for the mentally ill person getting treatment and staying in treatment as the mental health treatment provider or the clinician, the person to stop using drugs, the person to stay in the treatment program they've been sent to, the person not to be arrested again. I am as responsible as those out in the community. When you accept that responsibility for outcomes, then you look at your job differently. What does a judge traditionally do? We sentence people. Then we go back in our chambers and we look at the next case. We forget them. I mean, how many times in my life have I sentenced people and forgotten who in the heck they were, and they come up to me 10 years later and I wouldn't even know, you know, I couldn't even remember what I was doing, you know, in terms of sentencing that long ago. It's very easy to just sentence somebody, and we use numbers. You know, this is the midterm, the mitigated term, these are the enhancements, and this is 16 years, and this is 2, and then we're gone. We're out of it. We're not, nothing. When you work in a mental health court, you're accepting responsibility for these 2,300 people, and when they screw up, you know, you look first at yourself. Did you do the wrong thing? Did you get them into treatment fast enough? And you start looking at yourself differently and your job differently. So, and Judge Morse, of course, she's listened to me before. There are 3 roles. I think a judge, and I would say, number 1, there should be a convener. What is that? That's what Judge Loftus talked about. And you know, the wonderful job he did in the task force is to get this into a rule of the court, that it is the job of the presiding judge to bring everyone together, law enforcement, mental health, substance abuse, the sheriff, probation, parole, bring them all in a room, and then what is the presiding judge going to do? Well, I hope the presiding judges are going to say, it's a brand new rule, of course, we haven't seen it yet in action, but they're going to do what all presiding judges do, and Judge Loftus is one, or was one until a moment ago. And that is, they are going to try and solve a problem. Because why did you call these people together? What the heck are we doing here? And then they're going to have to listen to what the problems are on the street, and then they're going to think about, well, what are alternatives? One is a mental health court. Now, when you have a mental health court, how do you get it started? You got to have a judge. What is a judge good at? Calling meetings, because people will come. You know, generally, particularly if the presiding judge is there, you don't have to offer, you know, refreshments and lunch. People will come because they're not sure what in the heck the court might do next, particularly if you invite the people that are critical, mental health, substance abuse. Then you need to go to their meetings. But the main job of the judge is to help bring all these people together, because a judge can do that. The judge has to motivate. If you're not going to motivate the people that you're working with, and if you're not going to motivate the clients in front of you, you're not going to succeed. And then you have to use all these things we've been mandated to use, evidence-based practices, okay? And start looking at research and start paying attention and seeing how stupid what we've done in the past in terms of the outcomes we want now has been, and that we got to change it. And finally, you got to see people on a regular basis, all right? Now, The next step is to do something which you all understand, but judges have got to get it. And that is, you got to believe in treatment. This is a compilation of, I think, 150, 135 studies. And look, when you just punish people, you get more recidivism. You make them worse. When you mix some punishment with a lot of treatment, you get a better result. Now, see, we are in a world where we have been, beaten into us, and the legislature does this to us as well. They're always adding more punishment, enhancements, and so forth. So we're used to punishing that. We're all thinking that way. We got to think differently, because research shows that if you want to have success with the mentally ill and with substance abusers who are mentally ill, you don't want to over-rely on punishment, okay? Now, lesson 3, we have to be true to the model, all right? And, treatment has to continue to be our focus. And number 2, participation in treatment must be mandatory. So when we are ordering people to do things, as I say, look, you have to drug test, you have to see your parole agent, you have to go down and check in with this person or that, and you got to serve some more jail time that judge ordered. But look, all we talk about here is treatment. The other things we will discuss. We will discuss who you're hanging around with and so forth, but number 1, you got to be in treatment, because if we can't get there, we don't get anywhere. The other thing that judges have a hard time accepting is the coerced treatment, and this is the value of a mental health court. Because what a mental health court judge does is coerce treatment. That does not mean that we force medications. That is not, that's not what we do. But what we do is to find ways to motivate and convince people to do what they do not want to do. And that's the coercion. And the question is, does it work? And it does. I mean, this is another series of studies, going out 5 years with the blue line being mandated treatment, okay? And you can see they actually even do better than when it's voluntary, all right? And so what we have to understand is that we're not doing something bad when we coerce people to go into treatment. We're doing the right thing that's evidence-based. Then the most important thing that we've learned about mental health courts is you've got to identify who you're going to work with. Now, all right, I have 2,300 people. Maybe tomorrow I'll have 24 or 19, who knows? But who are these people? And each mental health court will be different. Judge Wong is here from San Francisco. An entirely different program, in terms of the number of people they see. But there's one thing that we've got to get right, and that is the ones we should be working with are those who are the highest risk to reoffend or continue behavior that's unacceptable in the community, and those that have the greatest treatment needs. Because we can't put everyone in these courts. Sure, my court is fine. I have a wonderful bench, great presiding judges, year after year. They believe in this, and so, we can go to 2,300. But they're going to be courts. It's not that they're not going to do that. They don't have the judge time. They're not going to make that commitment. But if you concentrate on these people, you're concentrating on the right ones, because what we have learned is that this model, where the court's involved with supervising people, works most effectively with those at the highest risk to continue behavior that's unacceptable or to reoffend and have the greatest treatment needs. And that is all determined, of course, by assessment. And I'll get into that. But look, lesson number 4 is this. And it was mentioned today, and I just want to go over it again, because again, if we don't all work together, and I know we talk about all this stuff, but then we don't make it happen. We have to understand that mentally ill people use drugs all the time, or alcohol. They have to have substance abuse treatment, and they have to have mental health treatment, and they have to have, I realize there's a difference of view about this, and I understand that, and it's fine if you're the director of mental health in a county to say, I don't treat TBI, and I don't treat dementia, and I don't do this, but we get it. And they all use drugs, and they all are mentally ill too, so you got 3 things going on. Then you have diabetes. Then you have HIV. And I mean, when I can tell you, 12 years ago, I looked at the caseload that I had then. It was large. I did not see this constellation of disorders that I see today. Today, I do not get a new person in the program that doesn't have at least 3 things going wrong, leaving aside the family and all the other stuff. But I mean, we got some heart, whatever it is. And we've got to address all of them, because you in treatment know if you don't address them all, it isn't going to work. Mental health medication isn't going to work if you're using drugs all the time. It's just going to screw you up. And so this is really a big issue that needs to be repeated. You know, and it's try to bring all these people together. I know in my county it's a real challenge. Sure, we're bringing mental health and drugs and alcohol. We're joining them together. Many of you come from counties where they're already joined, but still they're separate worlds. You go to the Veterans Administration, my veterans, they got to go over here for substance abuse, over here for mental health. They don't talk to each other. This is a federal program. You know, it's been around for years. They should have, you say, well, they should have figured that one out, but, you know, it hasn't happened. So, you know, this communication and coordination between all the areas of treatment that these clients are in. I mean, yesterday this poor soul, he's got a primary care doctor at the county hospital who gave him Zoloft, and then he went to see the psychiatrist who didn't know he was taking Zoloft, and he gave him, a very powerful medication, Haldol, and now this guy is coming to me and saying, what's going on in my life yesterday? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, are your doctors talking to each other? Why I'm not in charge of that? And he's right. Okay, and so we got to do better on that. The next thing is this one that we have learned, and that is, and I will tell you, if I was going to give you one thing to take away, it's this. We have made a great mistake in not understanding that the people who are in the mental health courts, it's not just mental illness, it's not just drugs and alcohol, and this has already been talked about. But I just want to emphasize it because I'm going to tell you, it's talked about again. Nobody does anything about it. We are starting a new program where we are going to put mentally ill offenders, and there's always this thing, well, are they ready? And they won't benefit from this. I always hear all of that. But the behavior doesn't change. The medications treat the mental illness, stop the substance abuse, but the behavior doesn't necessarily ever change because they have the antisocial attitudes, the wrong friends, they're always thinking pro-criminal, so they'll let themselves be used by others. They don't have jobs or education. They have nothing going. They need cognitive behavioral therapy. They need moral recognition therapy. This is what they need. I have found it works. And I am using it now with the most difficult group, the parolees who are in violation of parole, very high risk, very high need, and the PRCS, which is now the local parole population. But if we don't address this and use these therapies that are evidence-based practices, we are going to fail with this group, in my view, over the long run. And I'm not going to go through all of this. I mean, that's very straightforward. Cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm just going to emphasize to you that one of the lessons we've learned is we need this in mental health courts. So now lesson number 5 is what are the essential elements that are directly associated with good outcomes? You got to have the court. And that means, if you don't, and Judge Morse is doing a wonderful job of convincing her colleagues to do the right thing. And you got to have a lot of patience to do that. You can't expect, you should be, the wonderful thing about this this conference is you're in the position to drive the presiding judges crazy because they're supposed to be convening you and they're not necessarily. Maybe they are, but I haven't seen, I haven't gotten phone calls saying we were convened. So go get convened. Tell the presiding. See, the wonderful thing about presiding judges is when there's a mandate and a rule that they all support it, then it's easy to forget about it right after you supported it and it passed and it's now a rule. But it is a rule, right? So if somebody comes to you and says, did you do the rule? Did you do what you were supposed to do? Well, I haven't held the meeting. Well, let's hold it. See, you've got a real way now to get presiding judges to move, I think. The strong connection between all of the people that make it work, you know, and you've already heard about that. I'm not going to dwell on it, but it really is the team. Those people sitting up on the stage and all work together. I mean, they're the leaders of the teams. They're separate teams. But that critical group of people makes a mental health court work, and we have learned from that. See, the MOST program is really, to me, exactly what a mental health court should be, but it's more, you know, it's added another way of doing it. And it's wonderful. That's how things, that's why these elements work. It has to be non-adversarial. Now, this is hard for judges, it's hard for DAs and public defenders. But you heard from a DA today, you know. They're doing a reentry court up in Sacramento right here in this community. The judge of the reentry court used to be the head of the DA's association. I mean, so he's well-grounded in being tough. And he's learned that there's a better way to do it. And how do you do that? You're not adversarial. That means you reach an agreement as to how we're going to proceed with this person, and everyone's an individual. So you don't just throw people in jail, you don't just let people out of jail. You think about what is the right thing for that person, and you listen to treatment. But it can't be adversarial, because if it's adversarial, treatment will always lose. Probation will always win if they're mean. Parole will always win because they're very good at that. And the judge is going to lean in that direction. You know, judges, that's, you know, well, we want to make this work. So the way of mental health treatment, forget you're a DA or public defender, or, you know, look, we're working together here. The judge is just a leader. The judge doesn't know what he or she is doing, really. We're just trying to make this work. We're the motivator. Now, you guys help us figure out what to do, and that's the way it works. Then the people have to come back and see the judge frequently. Why is that? Because we know that motivates people to do well. It's amazing the effect of a judge telling somebody they're doing well is unbelievable. You see it in that film. These people, they think, you know, and you have to, and we'll go into it a little more, but that's the key to it. Come back and see the judge, okay? Assessment is critical. We've talked about this. Our task force, Judge Loftus went over it in his presentation. But let me tell you, the important thing about assessment is that 48 hours that Mac Jenkins talked about, absolutely critical. We need to be doing this in our jails when people are booked in. We need to get this information to the judge. And that's going to take a lot of work in some counties where it isn't done at all. It's taken a great deal of effort in my county to make it work. And it's got to be done by the right people. Risk and need can be determined over here. That's not terribly difficult to do, I don't think. You heard about the case, there's all the compass, there are all these instruments, all right? But when it comes to how are we going to meet these needs, what is the plan, we got to talk to the treatment professionals. And we have to follow what they say. And not say, you know, the worst thing is to let a judge make the decision, because it'll be the highest level of care you can dream of. So you need to have those assessments, and they have to be followed by the court. And in the mental health court, what you have to do is repeatedly reassess people, because no one stays the same. Sure, we want people to progress from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. But what if they screw up at phase 2? What do you do next? Go back to phase 1? Isn't that sort of a punishment model? Go back to phase 2, or are we doing this thing all wrong? So you got to listen to treatment, and you got to, you know, every time you see where they are or where they aren't, and what should we do next? All right. Next. What we have learned, I've already talked about this. Boom, I don't have to talk about it again. This is an important point. What mental health courts have proven is that if you are working with custody mental health, whoever in the jail, under the sheriff or whoever administers that part of the jail, is responsible for the mentally ill. There may be no one, but there should be. If there isn't anyone, you need somebody in there. You have to work with them. The courts traditionally do not work at all with the jail. I mean, they let people out. I mean, we make the orders, they follow them. But we don't listen to what they have to say. But in a mental health court, you listen a great deal, because they do assess the people. They do place them on medications in my jail and in most jails where they have mental health services. And you got to get that, you got to take that into account, because when people are released from jails, they should never be released without a prescription for for medications. Not only that, you got to get the medications to them. And we do that. We do that. Now, it took me 2 years to get that established, believe it or not. You think that was simple, but it wasn't. We used to actually give them the pills when they left. And then everyone thought that was unethical for the doctors, so we had to change all that to the prescription, which was fine, except how are they going to get it filled? I like to think about taking the pills because you at least have them in your bag when you go out the door. But then you have to find a way. That's where your case managers, your probation officers, and your parole agents, that's when Mac Jenkins talking about that soft handoff. That's where they really should be in play. You know, they should be there. And then we need, you know, what I call is mental health needs to be going into the jail and talking. You see, these are the same clients, believe it or not, because I order them all to be in community treatment. They get enrolled in treatment, then they screw up or whatever. Now they're back again. Well, why aren't we doing the same thing and doing it better and getting together? So that means that mental health has to get more involved with what goes on in the jail, because Mac is absolutely right. I mean, there's so much research on this. The first 3 hours out of jail are the critical ones, in my view. The first 3 hours. You let people out at 10 in the morning or 2 a.m., it's those first 3 hours, it all goes, and I say it's really the first 40 minutes. But I give it 3 hours because I say, you know, that's it 3 times, check it out. And if you're not working with them, then you're not going to get anywhere. Lesson 6, we have to understand the people that we're working with in court, in the court setting. You know, we have to, as judges, confront the stigma. We have to recognize that these people are discriminated against, not only in the court, but outside the court in the community, that they're treated like less than normal, right? And in a bad way. Then we have to learn how to talk to people, right? And we didn't show much of that in that film, but you know, you have to learn how to talk to people like they're real people and ask them how their day's been and what's going on and why do you look so, what's bothering you today? You seem to be very upset. Did you, you know, and you've got to get out on what they're interested in talking about. Yesterday I was talking about things like one person I don't know how he got through the metal detector, but he did. He's out, he's homeless, he's in the streets, and he's very mentally ill, but he captured in a little box a rat, small rat, or mouse, I don't know which, but I assume it's a rat, and he brought it to court with him to show me, and he wrapped it up in his coat, and he got through the metal detector. I do not know how. I guess he had it in his cap. And all he wanted to talk about was his new pet, all right? Now, you could scream, you could call the deputies, or you could shoot the rat and him, or you know, you could do all sorts of things. But the point is, his focus is on the rat. You know, his focus, this is new to him. He's taking care of something, and it's very important. That's his reality. If I'm not there, I mean, I'm not helping him. I'm just going to make this worse. They're going to arrest him because he brought a rat into the courthouse. And we have an old courthouse. And Judge Loftus is Gideon, a new one, but we have an old courthouse, and we have rats. And so this is not a popular subject among anyone in the courthouse. He wasn't arrested. The rat was not killed. It wasn't taken away from him. He goes out. Now, what does that take? Incredible collaboration. No one laughed at him. The inmates in custody have learned they're not allowed to laugh. That's a very important rule. Never make fun of people because of where they are in their mental illness. And he left the courthouse. And hopefully the rat's fine and he's fine today. And we will see. And so that's what it's all about in terms of what the judge must do. Now, this is big. Change our expectations. Lower the bar. When I say this, judges get really mad at me because that's unequal justice. No. What are your expectations? The only expectations I ever have is someone will stay in treatment, not be arrested for at least a month, maybe 2 weeks, depending on the person, and that they do a few little things. That's all I want. If they do that, bam, they get praises, prizes, whatever. Parolees, all I ask is they come to court and they'll probably win something because they never do anything you tell them to do. And so, you know, this is the way you have to think as a judge. All right? Now, this is where you come in. I feel that and I've just noted this, most counties don't give enough priority to the homeless, the mentally ill when it comes to treatment, you know, because these are the people that never take advantage of it. It's just kind of a mindset I've seen. It was true in my county. It's not true today. The resources are, because this is very expensive. You know, this is not cheap stuff. Full service partnership, if you have, you know, in your county, 400, 200, whatever number you want to have, 50 full service partnership slots, and not one of them is filled by a criminal justice client coming from court, out of jail, you got a problem. You got your resources in the wrong place. Because what's going to break us is too many people in jails and prisons. We got to have equal access to treatment and give these folks the resources they need. Then, you know, this is the collaborative again. We don't have to go into that because you've already heard enough about it. Let's talk about lesson 7. This is the supervision approach, probation and parole. And this is working. See, I would go for, and I know Mac, if he'd had another hour, he would have explained in great detail how he's teaching probation officers to work out in the community. But the idea of our recommendations that Judge Loftus presented to you was this. The probation officer and parole agent shouldn't just be working with the offender out in the community, should be working with treatment. I get TSRs, we call them treatment status reports now, that have a great deal of information from treatment about what should be done in terms of the supervision of the client. You know, that this person needs more help in getting this done, and could his probation officer or parole agent help him get an ID, okay? Because without the ID, he can't get general assistance in our county. And parole and probation can give IDs. Work within the community and not in the office. Mentally ill people don't go to offices easily. Nobody office. Don't focus on technical violations. Let them go. I mean, look, if we locked up everybody who tested dirty, I mean, you know, I would have 2,300 people in jail. I mean, stopping the use of drugs is not easy, as you all know. But we don't have to constantly incarcerate people for that. And not visit, you know, if you don't see your parole agent this number of times a month, I mean, they get dinged by their supervisor. So how does that all work out? Well, they throw you in jail for not doing that. That's all got to change. We got to have a new world here. And you know, forget about the technical violations. Let's just keep this person in treatment and in the community. All right, next, incentives. This is something that I think is really something when you talk or when you work out with judges or probation or parole. This is an evidence-based practices. This nonsense of flash incarceration, 10 days at the whim of a probation officer or parole agent, that is not an evidence-based practice. With the mentally ill, what works are incentives. They will get themselves into jail on their own, okay? They do not need our help, okay? They will screw up and they will go to jail. They won't, you know, whatever. They'll be rearrested. But you know, sanctions are in the eyes of the beholder. If you're mentally ill and you don't get while you're being sent to jail for 10 days, you look on it as what? One thing only, punishment. And that's always the way you've been treated. So you learn to anticipate and expect it, and it's learned behavior. It teaches you that you are to be punished, then do bad, then be punished, then you see it goes on forever. We got to stop that. Incentives are what works. Just saying to somebody, gee, you look great today, even though he doesn't matter. You feel a little better. We all feel better if we're told that, you know, and that's what you work on. Lesson 8, we bring treatment and services to the court. All right, the better the outcome. That's this fast thing, all right? And I'm just gonna tell you that what we have done is actually, you know, as we're going to the last degree of trying to make this work, we have actually put urgent care in the courthouse. A doctor, medications, right in next to the courtroom. Why? Because I have people that go out the door, I mean, you have 2,300 people, they go out the door and they're arrested immediately. They've decompensated, they're in the courtroom, there's nothing I can do. I can give them the old talk, well, you need to go see your psychiatrist or whatever. You need to go get that prescription filled. But it's so much easier if you have mental health and substance abuse and the psychiatrist in the courthouse. That's what we've done. But you do the best you can. The main thing is to get it to them right away or they're going to be arrested. This is what the courthouse looks like, and you could see, even though this is drawn by a law student, so the court looks big, because that's his view of life. But really, what's big is not the courtroom, it's all the things around it. the mental health case management, the doctor, the drug assessment, all that stuff is what really matters. Lesson 9, mental health treatment should be the expectation, not an option. You see that with realignment, when judges are told, okay, but you have choices. You don't have to do that. Well, you should do it. It's not an option, all right? This one is very difficult. This is all about, all right, I'm going to cut to the chase here because of time. I'm going to tell you something. We as judges and as people at the county level, we cannot afford to keep putting people in jail. Most counties cannot build another jail. It's publicly unacceptable. In my county, you couldn't build a jail if you wanted to. Contra Costa, they just stopped it, okay? You're not going to build any more jails, so we got to do something about getting people out of jail. And what we know is this. Now, this is where it's a very interesting study. And what I want you to note here, because we know that there are two things that drive jail population. It is the length of stay, okay, and the number of times that these same people come in. Look at how many beds we're tying up. 82% of the admissions are people who spend less than 11 days. And who is that? It's the mentally ill and the homeless, okay? And that's why we can't just sit around and say, we'll wait for this to work. We got to make it work now. Because if you have a crowded jail, as has been pointed out in study after study, judges lose credibility. The system uses integrity. Bad people are not being punished. All right, lesson 10. It gives us a chance to build a better system for the future, and I think that's, I've already talked about that. It's all about collaboration. Now it's about Judge Loftus.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to have that sense of commitment and passion after 32 years on the bench like Judge Manley does? He's an enthusiastic and a unique resource for our court. But I am a little bit miffed at him because yesterday when we were driving up here, and my courtroom is across the hall from his, he told me about the guy with the rat. And we have enough rats in our courthouse without Steve letting people bring them in. So he's going to have to monitor his behavior in that regard. All right, so my subject area this afternoon is juvenile mental health, and as Steve said, there are some differences. I'm not sure that they are as dramatic as he would suggest, but they are. And I'm going to start with this slide that says what the purpose of a juvenile court is, because I think that the juvenile mental health court exactly matches the purpose of a juvenile court. In conformity with the interests of the public safety and protection, receive care, treatment, and guidance that is consistent with their best interest. That's the juvenile who is there because of delinquent conduct, and holds them accountable for their behaviors and is appropriate for their circumstances. That's what we try to do in juvenile mental health court. Our court has certain goals in terms of juvenile mental health treatment. Treat the underlying causes of the criminal behavior. Keep the community safe and decrease recidivism. Hold the juvenile accountable. Find solutions that are strength-based, child-centered, family-focused, and culturally appropriate. How do we do this? Well, and let me go back for just a second to talk about that last one, which I think is critical. The juvenile mental health court in our county is not called a juvenile mental health court. It's called the Court for the Individualized Treatment of Adolescents, CITA, C-I-T-A. Everyone refers to it as CITA. That's got a dual meaning. It has a blanket meaning in Spanish, et cetera. But it really is a court that treats individuals as juveniles individually that have mental health issues. But the problem with mental health for juveniles is culturally, that's a very difficult thing to come to grips with. And in order to make a juvenile court, mental health court work, you have to have not only the juvenile, but the family involved in the treatment process. And culturally, it's often difficult for some people to come to grips with the fact that their child may have a mental health issue. And therefore, you need to be able to, at the beginning of the process, educate the child, but most importantly, the family, about what it is, what mental health is about, and what it means, and how to deal with it, and why it's a good thing that they're in that court to be able to deal with it for their kid. And it's very important that it be done in a culturally sensitive way, because different cultures address these issues in different ways. And we're in a very multicultural county with lots and lots of different people. 52% of the people in our county do not speak English at home. Many of them are foreign-born, and therefore you need to be able to deal with people in their culture in the way that's appropriate. Okay, the methodology. What do? First of all, we do screening. As Steve said, screening is critical. It's clearly critical with juveniles. Every juvenile that comes into juvenile hall needs to be screened for mental health issues. If, in fact, they have a mental health issue, there's triage if need be, but there's a comprehensive assessment process, because if the probation department, which brings them into juvenile hall, recognizes, gives them a test, they use a test instrument to kind of identify whether or not there may be a mental health issue, and then they refer them to the mental health department for an assessment. That assessment then assesses whether or not that juvenile has a serious mental health problem that we can deal with. There's a coordinated approach with a multidisciplinary team. We meet regularly to be able to assess what it is that we need to do. There's some criteria we'll talk about in a second. It's non-adversarial. As Steve said, it has to be non-adversarial in order for it to work. But of course, that's easier in juvenile court, because you see, in juvenile court, it's supposed to be non-adversarial. It's supposed to be about the juvenile and correcting your behavior and making sure that they don't go back into the criminal justice system in a big way. So non-adversarial is not as difficult there as it might be in the adult court. Services for both the juvenile and the family is part of this. Sharing confidential information between agencies. Part of that education that is at the initial stage with regard to the family is to get the juvenile and the family to sign off to be able to share this information between the mental health assessor, mental health department, the probation department, the public defender, the district attorney, probation, and the judge, so that we all know what the mental health issue is that we're dealing with, and that the juvenile and the family know that that's going to happen. They need to know that, they have to understand that, and they have to accept that. And that's part of the work of the mental health professional who meets with the family in a culturally appropriate way and says, look, here's what we can do for your child. Your child has committed an offense. Your child is a child that we have assessed that has some certain needs that are not going to be otherwise addressed, and we can help you with that if you cooperate with us. And when they do, we can help them. Mental health experts have an equal voice in developing the plan and monitoring the supervision. That's critically important. The mental health worker has to be able to say, along with that even though probation thinks this is the right disposition, this is what we think will be helpful for that kid and the right thing for that kid right now. And so the DA, the public defender, and the mental health worker all have an equal voice, along with the probation department, in terms of what the disposition ought to be. And then the judge takes it into account and makes the best decision he can. Frequent judicial reviews. It's important. These kids are kids, okay? And in all juvenile cases, it's important to make sure you have a connection with that kid, but it's important, particularly for mental health kids, to know that the judge cares about them and understands them and talks to them in a way that says, I'm really interested in making you be successful in your treatment program. Community-based supervision is also critically important in terms of the resources available. Well, Steve, all right. So there are some things about juvenile. Since I was going second here, I didn't put in too many slides, recognizing that my colleague would be taking most of the time. But I want to give you some statistics that I didn't put in. In a study found that juveniles involved in an intensive mental health treatment program have a significantly lower recidivism rate than juveniles receiving standard mental health treatment, have created a benefit cost analysis ratio of 7-to-1. Now, one of the other statistics is, and this is true, and this is also true with regard to adults, but it's particularly true with regard to students, 79% of the youth who meet the criteria for a DSM-4 diagnosis meet the criteria for 2 or more, and 60% meet the criteria for 3 or more disorders. And that's what we found statistically in terms of dealing with the youth. The other thing that is true is that a very significant percentage of juveniles in custody are there because the juvenile court is the default mental health system for that juvenile. There's a significant percentage of juveniles that are in custody because nobody knows how to deal with them outside of the in-custody treatment because they have a mental health problem. That statistic is in here someplace, but I can't find it right at the moment. It's the default mental health system for an awful lot of juvenile offenders. In terms of the success of the juvenile program, let me talk a little bit about the inclusion criteria. They have to have a serious mental illness. There are some oppositional defiant disorders and those kinds of diagnoses that disqualify them. Those are not conditions that we see as part of a serious mental health problem. But they have to have a serious condition like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or some significant one. In our screening results, what we found was 37% of the juveniles that we screened had experienced severe trauma experiences, seeing somebody seriously injured or killed. 19% were significantly depressed. 10% had given up hope for their life in a juvenile. And 9% had symptoms of consistent psychosis, and 8% reported thinking about suicide. How do we deal with this? First of all, they have to have a pending disposition. It cannot be a 707B offense. It can't be that serious an offense. They have to be less than 17 and a half years old. They have to have a supportive adult and suitable home environment. They have to have a serious mental illness. And those conditions put them into the basis to be able to be a part of our program. Exclusions are conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, impulse control disorder, adjustment reactions, personality disorders, and other disorders in that line. The process is we screen them, we identify them, we then have a meeting, multidisciplinary meeting. We identify what services might be available, what the family can do or not do with regard to that individual in that particular context. We assign them a mental health worker and a probation officer to work with them to make sure that those are people that follow through. Those are probation officers that are specially trained in dealing with people with mental illness, particularly juveniles. We identify resources in the community that they can access, wraparound services occasionally, full-service partnerships if we can get that part done, and multidisciplinary therapy as needed. By the way, we started this juvenile mental health court with no new funding. We just took and made people come together and dealt with the resources that were available to us already. No new funding, no new positions. We just said, hey, we just need to reassign people differently and approach this in a different way. So every court can do this without having to cost themselves anything. It's just a matter of getting the right kind of attitude from all of the people involved. You have to have your DA on board. You have to have your public defender, your mental health director. You have to have the people who want to support this program and recognize how it should work. The judges are important as well. Obviously, as Steve talked about, judicial leadership is critical. You have to have a judge who wants to get this done, wants to have this and recognizes the need for it. We have a number of juvenile mental health courts now in California, and I think everyone will say that they are successful in that model. And if you allow that kind of collaboration and information sharing, you can in fact be very, very successful. The graduation criteria, how do we make sure that this works? Well, the minor and the family have to be connected with appropriate mental health services on an ongoing basis. The minor is stabilized in an individual treatment plan. He's attending school, working or vocational training, not a danger to himself or to others. He's in compliance with his probation orders. He's had 3 consecutive successful positive reviews with the judge. He's had no new law violations in a 4-month period. He's paid his restitution or has a plan to pay that restitution if need be. The success has been dramatic. More than 90% of all of the mental health juveniles that we've seen have been successful, stayed in the community, been successful, and been diverted from the criminal justice system and are dealing with in the mental health system. So with that, I'll end, and Steve and I will take questions from any of you that have any questions. In the juvenile court? Yes. We deal with that as part of the orders with the family when we deal with the restitution issues as part of the disposition of the case. And we take that into account. Sometimes it requires us to be creative about how to do that. But what we need and what we want is some indication that they're willing to address that issue in some concrete way. Whether it's even a small payment, $10 or $15 or $20 a month going toward that restitution, but on a consistent going forward basis. That kind of accountability is important for both us to have that sense of restitution, but also have the juvenile have that sense as well. And what we do is we tell the juvenile, this is really your obligation, and your family and you have to figure out how to get this done. Sometimes it's a matter of just deferring it for a period of time for them to be able to get organized in that direction.
This is for you, also Judge Loftus. Do you have a substance abuse treatment component in your juvenile mental health court?
You know, I should probably, because this is being videotaped, repeat the question. Do we have a substance abuse component in terms of our, and the answer is yes. We actually have two. We have a substance abuse calendar as well, where that's just the issue and not, there isn't a juvenile component, a mental health rather component to it. But also as part of the mental health piece, that's part of the assessment in terms of what we can do or should do. And as we go through the reviews, we indeed have the juvenile have to test if that's part of the element as well in terms of the particular needs of that individual.
And go to substance abuse treatment?
Yes, yes, if that's needed, yes.
We have time for about 3 more questions. Go ahead, Tom.
My name is Tom Trade, and I'm from Alameda County. Billy Swafford and I built together a behavioral health court in 2009, and our executive team had the pleasure of coming first to Judge Manley's court to take a look, and then we went to San Francisco and Contra Costa County as well. The Contra Costa County judge said to us something that still sticks in my mind. She said, "This kind of court is not for every judge. What we work on here is not the power of punishment, but the power of praise." It really stuck with me. When we first began the court, we were approached by a major TV news station asking about doing a story, and we demurred because we were just beginning. And so I have 2 questions, and the first one is, since we began, I've often sat in the court marveling at the dynamics and how utterly fascinating they are to see the teamwork between what are usually adversaries and praise when that usually isn't seen. And I've reflected about the love of the American people in courtroom dramas on television. And I thought how fascinating it would be and what a great public service it would be if somebody made up a TV series. Because nonfiction, there'd be all kinds of confidentiality problems, but they made up a kind of Perry Mason drama, but it was in the courtroom, but it was showing a mental health court with the dynamics that go on in that court, with the kind of human interest story each week about the person, a couple of key clients involved. Has any of you ever approached either of you about that? Have you ever heard of anybody thinking about that kind of idea?
Yes.
I'm not going to repeat the question. But I think you're correct that it's not for everyone in terms of the judges. It's a volunteer kind of a thing that each judge has to assess by themselves. And the answer to your question is, for me, no one has ever approached me, but I'm sure that may have happened to Judge Manley.
Yes, I mean, there's been a number of producers, and I mean, we're just going to do something with some producers. I believe it relates to PBS, but I'm not sure. But the challenge is this, and I have been involved in this particularly with drug courts. We actually had a drug court on television with a southern state and a real judge and the problem with all of that, in my view, is that these are very fragile people, and if you subject them to that, but if it was dramatically done, then to me you have no control. They're not interested in what I'm interested in necessarily. They have to sell the sponsor's products. They got to put out a reality or some kind of show that will attract an audience, so they're going to write it the way they want it. And I mean, we have talked to people where they want to come in and do, but I've always said, no, because, what we do, we're judges. We can't be involved in that kind of thing when it's drama. But I presume at some point, if it becomes, I know they have talked a great deal about doing it as to drug courts because they're very well known nationally, but I have yet to see a drama.
Unless you're the executive producer.
Right.
Well, and this is not going to be Judge Judy. It won't be nearly as
No.
entertaining.
We just have time for about one more question, this gentleman here.
Yeah, Judge Manley.
Yes, sir.
Dean Troop, Shasta County.
Surely.
We're barely 2 months into starting our behavioral health court.
Fantastic.
It seems it's very collaborative. People seem to be getting along well. But I can't help but focus on the part where you said it's so critical, the assessment part.
Right.
Of selecting the first, for a very small program and trying to select. And I wondered if you had any advice from the mental health side, how we continue to communicate that to not look like we're trying to block what public defenders and a variety of people would like to have happen, at the same time knowing we probably have a little more expertise about what is likely to be successful. Any
Yeah.
advice?
Well, my advice is this. You need to know the risk level of the judge, the public defender, and the DA, where they are in terms of who they would let in. I mean, you heard Judge Loftus give you a list of in the juvenile who we will let in. Now, in the adult, there is no bar to anyone because the decision's made by other judges. Once you get that sense of who they will accept, then I think you should approach them by saying, we have found that these are the people who will respond the most to treatment, who need treatment interventions and don't get them. And I would look at it, and I mean, I don't know what your situation is in the jail, but if it is bad, then I would look at making it a custody program, because I think then judges can more clearly relate to the fact they're having an impact that's helping their county and helping their community, as opposed to just, the one most dangerous thing to do is to pick winners. Because if you try to pick winners as a clinician or a treatment provider, and they screw up, you lose the trust of the judge, because it's the judge who looks bad, particularly in a small community. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.